Alrighty, so I'm gonna show how at least I sharpen knives. I'm a big fan of oil stones, especially these Northern India stones. This is an older one. It doesn't have a coarse grit bond in it. It isn't a full 8-inch length one, but I really like it a lot. We used water stones as well. This is a Kiwi stone from Finland, but I'm also a big fan of the Arkansas oil stones as well, and Washita stones. And I'll probably use this one to show as well. But these two are, we can try them, but this one's not particularly suitable for these knives. We can get into that. But alright, so you're supposed to use some sort of honing oil. All I take is mineral oil. You know, just stuff you get at the store, the food grade stuff. Buy bad stuff for horses as well in the gallon. And mix it 50-50 with mineral spirits. So you still don't want to drink it, but just wash it off. But I've used a number of different oils. When I was sharpening profession, I'd use simple green on the stones. It wears them faster, but they cut faster, and it floats this work well enough that it works well. But this is probably one of the best honing oils I've found. So really the basic concept with you sharpening a knife is just holding the knife, moving the knife on the stone at a consistent angle on both sides, relatively consistent, along the entire edge. And however works for you, that's great. There's a lot of videos out there saying, oh, you gotta use this technique or this technique. Whatever works, use it. So I'll show a couple different ways to do it here. This is how I normally do it. So I can feel what's going on, can control it with my right hand. And I was made for pressure, so it cut fast. And I can see the angle as well. So spend a little bit of time on each side. And then we're going to check it. What we're feeling for is a burr. Just slight roll on the edge. I feel it's not quite anything back there, but it doesn't really bother me too much. Don't use that part of the knife much. Oh, there we go. I'm just feeling for a burr, and that's it. Brought a burr up on it. Now, I'm going to lightly knock this burr off on this stone, and I'm going to do that by slightly increasing the angle, and very lightly, just with the weight of the knife, maybe a little bit more. And it back and forth, and that's going to just take that burr off. So, that's how I was going to use the next stone. I'll go to this Washita stone, which is a bit finer. But this Washita is a particularly coarse one. Not the coarsest one I've used, but decently coarse. One of the reasons I like it. Put a little oil on it. Now I'm just going to do the same thing. You can also go like this. Just do single passes on each side. It's a little slower, but it helps keep things even because you're doing just one pass on each side. And it's a good way to evenly wear the stone. Though with oil stones, that's not too big a deal. Water stones, they do wear pretty quickly, so you have to lap them relatively frequently if you're sharpening a lot. So just a few strokes. And that will generally put the burr in the middle, and then raise the angle just a little bit. And 4 to 6 left. And that's it. Now, oftentimes I will use a strop, but strop makes it cut just a little bit differently. But what it does do is make it so that if you got the edge just a little bit off or not perfect on the stone, the fact that the leather is soft and that's just a mild abrasive will generally fix any kind of things you missed on a stone. So I don't want to strop it too much because I like a toothy edge on it. Cuts bites in the skin of tomatoes or onions, various things. Bites better. So I'm just going to strop it just a few times. And that's it, right there. Obviously you don't want to cut into the strop, I'll cut the leather. And then to test test the edge, what I like to do is 3 fingers, very lightly put it on the edge and move it side to side. And if you feel it really quickly bite in, the catch, that's good. The more it catches, the better. So, moving on to something different. Now I'll try one of these water stones for comparison. And put a little bit of water on it. This is the coarse side. Same thing. You can also go like this. Move it. Go straight back and forth. You can trade hands. That's comfortable for you. Give it the left hand dominant, so I just keep the handle in my left hand and figure out something else to do with the right. As long as you're grinding away the edge evenly, that's all that matters. So, with the, can't quite feel the burr. I'm getting there. You can see the water stone is kind of dirtier compared to an oil stone. All you're going to get off of an oil stone is the swarth of the cuttings of the knife. You're really not going to get much stone. With water stone, you're going to get a lot of actual stone grit. You'll build up a slurry. And the more slurry you build up, oftentimes the better the stone cuts. So, it'll feel like right at first, it isn't cutting very much. But the more you sharpen, the faster it cuts. Up to a point. Okay, I'm going to do something like this. Just go back and forth. Now flip over to the fine side here. Put a little water on it. Now, one thing I will do is wash off all the grit and the swarf from the coarse side so it doesn't contaminate the cutting on the fine side. And I'll do the same thing. So a point on grit selections. A lot of people recently, it seems, have kind of been, I don't know, obsessed with finer and finer edge polishes. So really fine stones like this translucent Arkansas stone. This is a very fine stone. On the JIS, the Japanese scale of stones, it's probably equivalent to 8,000 or 10,000 grit. On the American standard, on which this would be a 300 and 325 grit. On the Japanese standard, it'd be equivalent to like I think a 2,000 to 4,000. So gives you a bit of grit comparison. But on one of the American standards that stones are graded on, and all abrasives are as well, this would be like a 6,000 or 7,000 grit. So you have to think about there's different grading scales, but also a finer edge like this one or like this one isn't going to have teeth. And what that means is you're not going to saw through material. It's not going to catch. It's really great for push cuts, so things like chisels, sushi knives, where the presentation is really important, and how clean that cut is really is decided by how sharp the knife is and how fine and polished of an edge it is. That's important. But when you're cutting vegetables, when you're cutting sinewy meat, it doesn't do as well, and it doesn't last as long as a coarser edge coming off of a 300 to 400 grit stone, or this would probably be like an 800 grit stone. That will catch and bite like on an onion peel. It'll catch it and quickly cut through it, but it won't, it's not going to be as good as a push cut, so it's not something that you really want for a chisel or a plain blade where you're always cutting perpendicular to the blade. Whereas with a knife, when you're drawing it, generally all the movements that you use with a knife have some sort of motion that is parallel to the edge. You want a bit of tooth so it saws. So, my 2 cents. So I'll do this on this one just for fun. And we'll find some newspaper and see if we can see any differences. Start to feel a bit on that. It's a light one. And we'll knock it off. I'll wipe it. And give it a quick strop on the fine side of my strop. And that's real fine, real polished. I see it catching the light a little bit more. It's not super fine, but it's decently fine. Okay, so another thing that I feel like a lot of people look over or overlook is the use of a steel. So this is something that you use after you have sharp knives off of a stone, excuse me. And what you'll find is that they'll get dull somewhat quickly, maybe a little faster than you think. Well, you don't need to go back to this and grind material off, because all that's happened to the knife is that the edge, when it was dull, it was rounded like that, and now that you've ground it back and made it sharp, well, it's just rolled. The tip of it has rolled one way, the other way, or it just kind of got the teeth have gone like this, and all you're doing is bringing them with this steel rod, bring them back in line, straightening them out, and that will maintain an edge without you having to remove material. Now there are a few exceptions. With most Japanese style knives, they're considerably harder than European knives, generally in the 62 to 66 Rockwell C range, whereas European knives are 60, 61, some as low as 55, because they're tempered for a spring, and it's a different style of sharpening system. For the really fine polished edges that a lot of Japanese chefs like, is popular in the sushi and the sashimi world, because of reasons stated previously, you need a harder edge to use to properly get the benefit out of a fine polished edge. But with slightly softer knives, the steel, it's 64, 65 Rockwell, it's pretty hard. It's harder than a knife. And all you gotta do is maintain the same, or roughly there. It's not something that has to be really measured out to degrees. As long as it works, it works. As long as you maintain the same edge, and you can feel it. You'll kind of you'll notice where it wants to glide, and your hand will get used to it. Just straightening out that edge. This knife wasn't particularly dull before this, but it wasn't all that sharp either. Just real lightly. Back. And, oh yeah. You might even be able to hear it. The phone will pick it up. That's a good sound. And get some paper. piece of newspaper is always a really good test. So put this one. And cutting paper is not necessarily indicative that a knife will cut things, be they food, wood, boxes. Doesn't mean that it'll cut well. Just means that the edge is sharp enough to put enough force to split the paper. But one thing that paper is useful is that when you slice into a piece of it, you can feel what's going on at the edge, and I can feel its door out at the point. There's a couple spots here that it catches, right there, right there, and then it's slightly door at the point. So it's a good way to diagnose what's going on after you sharpen something. Not the sharpest thing on the planet, but not too bad. That's not bad either. That's good. Okay, well, that's really all I have to say about sharpening. It's not that hard. You just need to go and practice it a bit. But like I say, however works for you to move this secondary bevel, just the little part that you grind on the edge of the knife, not the whole bevel, just the shiny part, however is most comfortable for you to move this consistently on both sides and maintain the same angle, however that works for you, that's how you should do it. Like I said, I generally go like this, but you can do strokes, you can do circles, the sky's the limit really. You just gotta figure out what works for you. So yeah.